2 minutes past the time, so let's get going. Much everyone for being here and making the time. I really wanted to acknowledge that it's a busy time for everyone. And again, I'll do a proper introduction, Minister, but it is a sitting week, so thank you so much for having a few minutes for us. I wanted to start by, as a migrant to this country and in the spirit of reconciliation, I really wanted to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land where we all meet and we all gather across Queensland. I wanted to acknowledge that in this issue, we would have thought that 60,000 years of existence on this land, that Indigenous people would have a lot of wisdom and knowledge that they could pass on to us. And also acknowledge that one of the limitations of this project is that the challenges in engaging, we try to engage across communities, across neighbourhood centres. That was the kind of the brief, but that we need to do more work in engaging with traditional custodians in how we do this process of social repercussions of some things which are really land management. And again, acknowledge that with all the natural disasters that we are experiencing currently and across the border in New South Wales, to really acknowledge that, with urbanisation, with poor planning decisions, with the environmental cost of our lifestyles, the people that suffer the most is the Indigenous people all over the world. And I'm very conscious of that. I wanted to acknowledge the dignitaries that are present here today. So the Honourable Ian Enoch, Minister for Communities and Housing, also Minister for the Arts and the Digital Economy. Also Katie Holmes, thank you Katie for being here. So the Assistant Director General for the Community Services for the Department of Communities. And also from the department, Heather Lack and Candy Peach, thank you so much for being here. And also just to acknowledge that there's people from all levels of government, and also people, representatives from Qfca and from GovX. So thanks so much for being here. And also to all the neighbourhood centres and other partners that are with us. The purpose of today is to launch the Bushfire Resilience Strategy. Because we are meeting online, there might be some technical issues, so please be mindful with that and anything that may arise. But if it wasn't that we are meeting virtually, we would probably be meeting in an office in Brisbane, and we would have cut out the opportunity for everyone else to participate. So we're actually thankful that we have that opportunity. So please keep yourselves on mute. I've asked Chris to just put you on mute, but we will have a Q&A session towards the end, so save your questions for then or put them in the chat. There might be some people phoning in, so there's a link on the slides to how to link in just by phone. This bushfire strategy, it's part of a broader picture that Qfca is building around disaster resilience in Queensland. We already did a little bit of work on drought and monsoons. This is the last part, but we will present sort of a more cohesive strategy later on. But for the purposes of today, we'll just focus on bushfire. We are recording some of the information during the session, so just be mindful of that. But if we share any of this publicly, we will try to do the best we can to de-identify the participants. So to share some of the context why Qfca and neighbourhood centres have developed this strategy, Queensland is the most natural disaster affected state in Australia. While it is reported that many major non-profit organisations respond to natural disaster, the work of local neighbourhood and community centres is often overlooked. The centres, neighbourhood houses, neighbourhood centres have been operating in local areas for more than 40 years, conducting community development with their communities and orchestrating citizen-led solutions for the challenges that they face. So this local knowledge and relationships, long-term knowledge and relationships, mean that they are well suited to prepare for, respond to, and recover from bushfires and other disasters, particularly after that 3-month, 6-month mark, well into the future after the disaster has happened. The centres are incredibly resourceful when supply chains are cut to external services and are often involved in long-term recovery efforts in the years following. As reported in the 2019 Queensland Bushfire Recovery Plan, Over the summer of 2019-2020, more than 90 bushfires occurred in Queensland, covering 7.7 million hectares of land across 14 local government areas. Neighbourhood centres have responded by supporting individuals, supporting communities affected by the fires, and they are committed to helping them rebuild and support that resilience. The Queensland Neighbourhood Centre strategy for bushfire resilience has been developed with local neighbourhood centres rather than for neighbourhood centres. And a key feature of neighbourhood centre work is the partnerships they form on a local and wider community level. This strategy creates an opportunity to strengthen support for centres from local, state and federal governments, as well as other non-profit organisations and key stakeholders working in bushfire affected areas. The implementation of the Queensland Neighbourhood Centre strategy for bushfire resilience will require resourcing for the sector to enhance the capacity of these centres to adequately support bushfire affected communities. I really want to thank you again all for being with us here today. And I want to invite the Honourable Leanne Eno to provide an official welcome for today. Leanne. Now I'd like to hand over to Natasha, who is the Disaster Projects Coordinator. Tash?
Thank you, Thomas. So as part of the project, the purpose of this is about highlighting the value of neighbourhood centres' role in building the resilience and social cohesion of communities who are affected by bushfires. So the focus area has been Central Queensland, and with Qfca's support, we've been able to extend that through to the Sunshine Coast area. So those areas in and between in Central Queensland and Sunshine Coast. And the implementation timeframe is 3 years. So from 2021 now until 23 in March to really enhance what is already happening through the ideas and the issues raised by neighbourhood centres through the development of this strategy. So just onto the next slide there to give you a bit of an overall picture of how this all fits. There has been a drought strategy and monsoon resilience strategy, and now this bushfire strategy with the joint funding arrangements. And just to reiterate, I'm extremely grateful for these funding opportunities, because without it, this work could not have been done. So this has allowed quite a comprehensive strategy development across these areas in different areas of the state, which we plan next to bring this into a Queensland-wide strategy on disaster resilience. And that will allow the recognition of different wider geographical areas, as well as in addition to what's been in these particular strategies, and also to identify the compounding issues and impacts that come from not just single disasters. As we know, we usually in Australia and particularly Queensland suffer from many at a time. So to allow the complexity to unravel in a broader strategy and also include COVID and other natural disasters. So that's how it fits in a whole.
I'll talk to Mike.
The process of today, we will go through a bit more about the strategy, some key findings, and hear from neighbourhood centres, in particular neighbourhood centres, about the actual strategies. And then we'll have some time for questions and go into some further formal responses after that. So I'd like to now hand over to Mengting Lin, who's been the dedicated project worker on this, doing a lot of the detailed work in working with centres and also on the write-up of the strategy. So over to you, Mengting.
Thank you, Natasha. Hi everyone, I'm Mengting. So just a quick look at the process of how the strategy come about. So the bushfire resilience strategy development involved a collaborative process that was grounded in participatory action research, and also community development principles. As shown in the diagram here, the process began with a scoping review of the literature on neighbourhood centres' role in bushfires and the broader disaster context. Through phone, online consultation and survey, participants share their knowledge of and experience in supporting bushfire-affected communities. And through these stories, we learned the pivotal role of neighbourhood centres in supporting local communities, particularly in preparation for and recovery from disasters like bushfires. The regular online consultations, including a presentation of the thematic findings, the phone conversations and surveys facilitated the process of developing, refining, and reviewing the 5 strategic strategies, the strategic priorities that we will present shortly. These strategies reflect the different needs and opportunities of neighbourhood centres that they have identified in their organisation and local communities. And as every neighbourhood centre's makeup and capacity is unique, each will implement these strategies according to their priorities, while recognising that support from the community as well as the government is also needed. Some of the key findings I'd like to share before handing over to the neighbourhood centre representatives. These are the findings that really informed the development of the bushfire resilience strategies. We learned that neighbourhood centres are well placed to support their community to plan and prepare for bushfires. The key role that they play in the response phase is to provide information and referral for the affected individuals. And neighbourhood centres have greatest capacity in the recovery phase and are invested in helping communities recover from bushfires. I will now hand over to the neighbourhood centre representatives involved in the strategy development, who will present a strategy and share their perspectives. For those people phoning in, please see page 21 of the strategy document. The link to the document is available in the chat box. So for strategy 8, we will hear from Helen Daly at the Neighbourhood Hub in Mackay.
Hi, thanks Menting. Hi everyone. Yep, so I'm Helen Daly from the Neighbourhood Hub in Mackay, and strategy A is raise awareness among disaster management representatives, the capacity of neighbourhood centres to respond to the needs of bushfire affected communities. While our neighbourhood hub in Mackay has not played a role in directly supporting communities after a bushfire, we did last year receive funding to operate in the monsoon recovery space. In the absence, however, of any flooding or cyclones, we have focused on building community resilience within that program. Part of that has included building the awareness of our centre to not just the general community, but also with the disaster management representatives. We have found this to be really important. For example, when we invited our SES local commander to have a chat about our centre, about the importance of being prepared, and so he could share some practical tips.
The passcode you have entered is incorrect. Please.
The SES local commander came to our centre to have a chat. He learnt for the first time about our centre's ability to provide immediate support to those in our community. He had previously thought that people impacted by disaster events needed to wait for the out-of-town services like Red Cross or Lifeline to arrive to provide that kind of crisis counselling support. And so he was really happy to hear how available and flexible we as a neighbourhood hub could be, and how we've got the ability to fill some of those gaps, particularly those social support gaps. We were also able to advise the SES local commander that we were happy to be guided by the SES and other local disaster management services when they identify needs, and now he knows that he can contact us directly. So we continue to build this awareness so that in times of disaster that we, the Neighbourhood Hub, can be relied on. And if we can't deliver a specific need that arises, we are well placed to find another provider who can. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. We will now hear from Catherine Shuren at Pomona Community House. Sorry, Catherine, I think you're still on mute.
How's that? Can you hear me? Okay,
Perfect,
great.
thank you.
Cool. So my name is Catherine Schuring and I'm a coordinator at the Pomona District Community House up in the Noosa hinterland. Strategy B, continue to build relationships with the local disaster management groups and explore collaborative ways to enhance local communities' resilience to bushfire. So just a bit of background, we are primarily Department of Communities funded, but also receive operational funding from Noosa Council. Council own our buildings that we operate out of, and we are part of the local disaster management group. So looking at preparation for a disaster on a very basic level, being part of the LDMG is great for simply putting names to faces, for finding out who's the go-to person in each organisation. Our LDMG is basically regrouping after a long time of not meeting, so this is really, really valuable. So if and when a disaster does occur, we're familiar with each other's roles. As part of the LDMG, we're kept up to date with what different organisations are doing and also what's missing. So for example, when Council made changes to their disaster dashboard, we had the capacity to inform the community about that through Facebook, through the monthly magazine that we published, the Qfca Connect. And at our last meeting, it came up that SES needed more volunteers. So we were able to write an article in our Qfca Connect and to put a call out to the community. So being connected allows for being involved and invited to any training opportunities. We just had a resilience in the face of disaster seminar run by St John's Ambulance in our premises, to which all members of LDMG were invited. And that was great. Later this year, we plan to work with the group in a Get Ready campaign, as well as some other preparations, workshops before that. So during a disaster, having that already existing relationship allows for knowing each other's organisations. What resources do we have? What are we good at? What can we offer and what can we share? One of our buildings, the Lawson Shed, is an emergency evacuation point. So the group, they know our premises. They know that we've got showers, we've got a great kitchen and how many people we can cater for. So that doesn't need to be asked. We're ready to go. Building trust before an emergency with the local group means that we feel comfortable about, talking to each other. So we feel comfortable coming to us and asking if they need any added information about what's happening in the local area. Often we've been called the eyes and ears on the ground. And if we don't know what's going on, hopefully we'll know somebody who does. And in return, we can ask information if there's something that we don't know. So where larger organisations can arrange for emergency responses quickly, we can find out where they're needed, where those resources are needed. So for example, since COVID, the community house has been provided with ongoing deliveries of frozen meals through Council and Oz Harvest, which we have supplied to families through schools, delivered to out-of-towners, and we've had supplies in our freezer ever since. And I can't imagine that it would be any different in a bushfire emergency. And post-disaster, I guess our main connection in the group post-disaster would be to local council in some ways. And again, it's a two-way communication. They would let us know what resources are available through a network of organisations, and we would refer on. And if we saw something that was missing, we would be able to ask council either to provide that or let us know where to go so that that could be provided in the community. So also being part of your local LDMG may possibly even keep you in the loop about what funding's around. So currently there are funds available through local council and the state government for programs that generate resilience and connectivity. So that's something that we're looking at and have already taken advantage of up here in the Noosa hinterland for various programs. And the other thing is that if you have that kind of relationship at some point after a major disaster meeting, that shared information about what worked, what didn't work can provide a basis for putting in what was missing, changing strategies so that local communities are better served. So as far as Pomona is concerned, we really feel that a good working relationship with the LDMG, along with shared knowledge, shared resources, adds up to a much greater ability to cater to the needs of our community in a disaster and really, really helps to build a more informed and more resilient community. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Well, we'll now hear from Margaret Osman at Hambledon House on Strategy C.
I think mine's strategy D.
My apologies. Strategy C, we'll be hearing from Corey McCullough at the Bundaberg and District Neighbourhood Centre.
Okay, thank you, Mentine. So I'm Corey McCall, the Centre Manager of Bundaberg and District Neighbourhood Centre. So strategy C is to develop a process to manage and support volunteers. So to establish an effective process for managing our volunteers during the disaster phases, we firstly needed to understand some important factors, and we came up with about 9 of them. So we have 25 volunteers in our centre. How many of them are willing to help? Also, what are our communication methods and how often should we be communicating when we have a disaster and they're activated? Who's going to prepare the rosters for volunteers being on site and those that are on call? How will we be maintaining people's well-being and ensure that workplace health and safety standards are being met? Considering what training is going to be required in the very short term and for the longer term. How are we going to measure task satisfaction for the volunteers? And importantly, how are we going to keep them busy? What about the fluid nature of volunteers? Some of them are only available on certain days. Some don't work weekends. So we've got to take all that into account. And let's appreciate different personalities, who can work together and who can't. So with all of this in mind, we needed to take account of all these factors when developing a volunteer coordination process as part of our disaster recovery phase. What we came up with was a need to define our neighbourhood centre disaster management team internally, who would be the main conduit between the local disaster management group and our volunteers. We saw a need for an induction to inform volunteers, to share information about the disaster and to understand the role that they're going to play. There was a need for daily debriefs to ensure mental and physical well-being and to uncover any unexpected issues. One vital part of the process will be to ensure that all volunteers have a reliable source of communication wherever they are. Moving forward, we will rely on guidance from the local disaster management group to ensure that the process we have in place aligns very closely with their disaster management process. Thanks, Mentine.
Thank you, Corey. I will now hand over to Margaret Osmond at Hambledon House for Strategy D.
Good afternoon, everyone. Margaret Osmond from the Hambledon House Community Centre, which is in the south of Cairns, which is on Gimwai Wallabara Yidinji lands. The neighbourhood and community centres are not just a community resource, but very much involved with helping to build resilient communities. And I know that's not news for you guys, but how can we help continue to build resilient communities if we ourselves as neighbourhood centres or community centres ourselves aren't resilient? So this is where this strategy really comes into play. A continuity plan is actually more of a program than a plan because there's quite a bit involved. To give your centre the best chance for continuity during and after a disaster, you need a current and regularly tested plan in the hands of the people responsible, who will be responsible for carrying out that plan. And if we get this right, after a bushfire or any other disaster, we can be back supporting community when we're needed the most. Here at this centre, we are currently preparing our plan based on what's being presented today. So this strategy has come in very handy for me on making sure that I cover all the elements of such a plan for this centre. So thank you very much, guys, for everyone who's been involved in this work. It is very impressive. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. We will now hear from Nikki Hughes at the Serena Neighbourhood Centre.
Hi, thank you. My name is Nikki Hughes and I'm from the Serena Neighbourhood Centre, as just stated. Thank you. The strategy that I'm reading is E, enhance resource sharing and collaboration among neighbourhood centres. As the Serena Youth Centre, the Serena Neighbourhood Centre is hosted by and physically located within a local government premises. The Neighbourhood Centre has a close connection to the Mackay Regional Council Emergency Management Team. The Serena Neighbourhood Centre is informed relatively quickly if the MRC EMT has been stood up due to any emergency situation. This closeness has seen the development of community-friendly and service-friendly resources. The Serena Neighbourhood Centre has both an online and a printable community directory. We have access to the local dashboard, which is a platform that's updated by all local, state and national emergency response services. The Serena Neighbourhood Centre is also a valuable resource within the community, as the Neighbourhood Centre has the capacity to check in with the community members affected by any emergency, ongoing and supporting long term. Moving forward, having the capacity to share this knowledge and processes with other neighbourhood hubs can only strengthen valuable resources and delivery. Thank you.
Thank you all very much for the strategies. Thank you, Meng Ting, Helen, Catherine, Corey, Margaret, and Nikki. Really interesting to hear your insights there, and I'm sure others have been too and may have some questions. So we are now going to go into question time. And if you do have a question, it might be easiest to put your hand symbol on in the icons from the reactions button there, or feel free to put a question into the chat box. And any representatives from neighbourhood centres or Qfca will hopefully be able to answer your questions. So please just put forward if you have a question. And it may be a question that is not directly from something that you've heard today. You may have a question about something more broadly about neighbourhood centres in response to bushfires or the disaster sector altogether. I don't see any questions.
I think Helen's put forward a comment about the volunteer process from Corey being great and very thorough, and wondering about sharing it, which is kind of linking both the volunteer process to this enhanced resource sharing and collaboration. So cool to see in action how we can share resources across the sector. And I wonder, Corey, if you'd like to comment a little bit more around that volunteer process and how, if there's pieces of it that you'd be able to share further with centres going forward.
Yeah, thanks, Em. Look, I'm very happy to share anything, of course. And what I'll do is I'll send the speech that I did for this through to Meng Ting for sharing. And Meng Ting, I think I've already given you our volunteer management procedure that we developed recently, or the draft, I suppose. And I'm thinking that if I did send that to you, that we could probably pull that out and resend that on to the members, if that's okay.
Absolutely. Thank you, Corey. We're just in the process of being able to make the resources more accessible via the Bushfire Resilience Forum and also the online resource direct library, which is available for all our neighbourhood centres involved in this project as well. So thank you, Helen, for a good reminder. Definitely get that organised for everyone so that greater resources can be shared and to encourage that collaboration and learning.
And that's one of the learnings from the process as well. It's been great to hear from centres, and as always, just the generosity of centres in sharing resources. So a big piece of some work for Qfca at the moment is re-looking at our website and how we can further emphasise and enable centres to share those resources online, as well as in more face-to-face and network contexts. So watch this space. There will be new and easier ways to share resources moving forward. And thanks so much for bringing that as something that we heard throughout. There is the strategies that centres were looking for ways to do that, which we're working on.
Just a comment here from Helen. She says that regarding the resource sharing, she wanted to just wanted to give an example of how I contacted the Townsville neighbourhood centres who were able to share some lived experience flooding recovery tips that we could incorporate into our program. That would be fantastic, Helen.
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to really stress that it is a really important part of the strategy. We're starting to look at things to include in the monsoon recovery, because we actually didn't have an event. We contacted the Townsville Centre, who we knew were quite fresh from that experience. And she was just a wealth of knowledge of all the things they learned and had to learn on the spot. Things like making sure that all of our staff and volunteers had undertaken the crisis counselling workshops. So we were able to implement that pretty quickly by contacting Lifeline. I think she shared with me this great spreadsheet of everything that they needed to cover, that they were involved in that direct recovery stage. So I just guess I want to emphasise the importance of picking up that phone, making contact with another centre if you know they've been there, and you want to make sure that the work you're doing is, really meaningful and going to help when it's really needed.
Absolutely. Thank you, Helen. And with that, to support that connection, we also have a forum and also a resource library for centres directly affected by monsoons as well. So again, part of that bigger piece of encouraging that connection and collaboration and learning.
I wondered if any centres wanted to comment further on that kind of compounding impact. So as this is the third strategy, and again, we're seeing more and overlapping disasters, just if any centres wanted to comment on how they're seeing that impacting on their communities and processes. I know that one of the things from the monsoon was the frequency of impact had a terrible benefit, in that centres had that extra level of preparedness from having gone through it multiple times. But I just wondered if anyone would like to comment further on that, the compounding effects. No worries, we might have to interview you all again for when we're putting the piece together. That's kind of one other piece that we'll be thinking through. So looking forward to more discussions around that too.
Sorry, it may or may not be relevant, but I guess for us, and having a few different experiences around the fires and different things like that, for us it was as well as resilience within service and capacity to deliver, but also having a look at individual capacity and resilience. So working on individual plans around a person's capacity to move forward and action a few things for themselves. So I guess for us, it's for example, elderly, who's close, if you need to relocate, where do you relocate, thinking through those connections and then doing that body of work about, feeling in a time where there's no disaster or anything, but rationally thinking through steps and procedure and making those links and connections. So that's something that was, for us, identified and seen as value to move forward with.
Thanks so much, Nikki. That's a beautiful example and is such a great impact for your community members as well, to be building those personal support systems.
Are there any final questions before we move on? No. Well, if anyone has any questions that they think of afterwards, you're more than welcome to contact a neighbourhood centre or contact us at Qfca anytime. So I'll hand over to Thomas for the final section.
Thanks, Tash. I wanted to acknowledge Natasha, but all the other staff that have worked really hard on the strategy and the actual documents, which you should have the link on the chat to go and see. And I also wanted to thank all the centres that were part of the shaping up the strategy and all the interviews and all the work that Menting put in conversations and sort of online focus groups that we had. So thank you so much for that contribution, but also the ones that presented today. So thank you so much for for you for making, because it makes it more interesting actually to hear it from you and your words than actually just reading the more dry sort of document. I wanted to acknowledge also the funders. That this project was jointly funded under the Commonwealth and the state's disaster recovery funding arrangements. So thank you so much to them. Just reiterate what Natasha said around more questions, like just touch base with Tasha Mengting, Qfca, for anything further. So I wanted to ask, to introduce and ask the Assistant Director General, Katie Holm, to talk a little bit, if she wants to make a comment around this strategy. I wanted to invite Katie to speak and sort of to formally or officially, or the highest ranking departmental person left, Leanne is left, to Katie to kind of, I don't know if you have a copy that you can throw up in the air, or if you want to say something to officially have it launched. But as a way of introducing Katie, for me, that I've had the privilege in being in the Qfca Management Committee for quite a few years. Before I came into this role, like many neighbourhood centre worker focused on very much my local area, you know, I was very suspicious of public servants and people within the Department of Communities. But I just wanted to let you know that Katie's been a great ally and a great friend of neighbourhood centres within the department, and in all the different ways that the department is morphed in the last few years. So I'm really happy, Katie, that you're here today to talk to the group, and that for other neighbourhood centres to have a chance to sort of at least electronically meet you. So, Katie, you want to say a few things about the project?
Thank you very much, Thomas. And I do like to think of myself as a champion for neighbourhood and community centres, and I know our new Minister Enoch, does as well. So it's a journey that we're all on in bringing your collective work together, and the department being there to support underneath the work that you do as such. So I see that as a real privilege. And I'm also very thankful for the invite to be involved today. I've not been available for the other two launches in this suite of products. And so it's been really wonderful to be able to be here today. And in particular, I'm really impressed with everyone's dexterity with the technology. And I think that really bodes very well. I know a lot of preparation would have gone into today to make sure everything is working, and it seems to have gone really smoothly. And I hope that this is a medium that we can all keep using because the network is so big, both the Qfca membership, but also the just over 125 centres that the Queensland Government now funds. So it's a really, one of the benefits of the pandemic, disrupting us and pushing us into trying new things. And I think we've all adapted really, really well. Turning now to the strategy, I've been listening very carefully for the last 45 minutes, and I'm really impressed with the quality of the product. I've obviously had an opportunity to see that before today, and it is really what the department sees and the Minister sees as a suite of products that have been developed, all complementary. And I'm really impressed with the way and the process and methodology and the way Qfca has worked with centres. It's been very, very clear to us that the centres have driven the process and provided that direct input into your experience and learnings. So it's obviously a suite of products that will be extremely useful for practical application across the state. And we now know through the experience of the last couple of years that the variety of natural disasters can fall upon the state anywhere. We've now had bushfires, so in the last couple of years. So it's no one in our location is immune, if you like, from disaster. So I think very, very useful suite of resources, and I think will be actually helpful in the development of other tools for neighbourhood centres, and I'm sure Qfca, you're thinking in that way as well. If I can touch on a couple of points in terms of those strategies, and thank you to the representatives who spoke to each of the strategies today. I think they were really fantastic summaries of what each of those are. The strategy, the document itself is really visual and therefore enticing in terms of being able to use it. And I really commend it to your entire network. And I hope that people do pick it up, because there's ideas in there for activities that could be useful, even for those centres and locations who are more experienced in responding to disaster. I think we'd all appreciate that sometimes when you're in the middle of that, you're very busy doing the doing and the responding, and very quickly the crisis ends and life gets back to normal. And there's not always, because of the busyness of neighbourhood and community centres, time for that reflection and learning and documenting all of that. So I think this suite of documents will help centres in that regard as well. If I can touch on the theme of volunteering and the strategy around volunteering, I think that's really impressive that you've all recognised the importance of that. And I know that Minister Enoch, as the Minister also responsible for volunteering, has been really pleased to see that featured, and as is the department. And we'll continue to work with Qfca and all of the centres to really build those linkages with volunteering and Volunteering Queensland, who we fund as a peak. You'll all know about the Queensland Government's commitment to volunteering and the response to the pandemic, which led to the establishment of the Care Army, which is a very big demonstration of volunteerism. And the department and the Minister are working with Volunteering Queensland to make sure that we can do everything we can to make the onboarding of volunteers easier, more simplified and straightforward for volunteering involving organisations such as neighbourhood centres. The Queensland Government has committed to $1.7 million in funding to ensure that connection can happen, and we'll be talking to Qfca and members and centres across the state shortly into how that commitment will be rolled out. So we're very, very keen to talk to you all about that some more. I think that the big takeaway for me and the department and the Minister from this process and this work that Qfca has led has been the significant collaboration that in itself is an outcome, not just the products that will be used by everybody, but in fact the collaboration that's gone into the development of them, and that sharing of information. And I'm sorry, I can't remember the whether that was Margaret who recalled contacting Townsville and seeking out information and experience, and that is, a really active demonstration of that collaboration outside of the development of these products. The Minister absolutely values that networking approach. She comes from a community development background, so she understands that innately. And she's really keen to see more of that collaboration and that sharing of experience and skills and learning. And finally, if I can just say, we see this suite of products as being able to be used by centres now, but also into the future in terms of learnings of how they're put together, what works best in terms of that distributed input and collaboration. I think it's been a really highly valuable investment, both from the Commonwealth's perspective, but significantly from the Queensland Government's perspective. So on behalf of the Minister and the Department, I would like to thank all of the centres who have contributed to the development of the products, Natasha and your team at Qfca who've brought all of this together, and Thomas for your leadership of the organisation to make sure that this could happen. So on behalf of the Minister, I think I can now officially launch the strategy for bushfire resilience and congratulate everybody for your work in developing it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Katie.
Yeah, thank you so much, Katie. I wanted to, again, acknowledge all of the people that have been involved in Ting, Natasha and Chris from the staffing side, all the centres that participated, and yeah, the funding from both levels of government. To the centres, I really want to encourage you to actually read it, because everything in it has come from the sector itself. So there's really important learnings there. And just like sort of Helen just did with reaching out to Corey around the volunteering stuff, I think there'll be some sort of nuggets in here that, you know, if there's something you want to know more about or how that came about or who could help you, well, one of the centres, you know, again, it came from centres, so someone would have that level of expertise to support all of us in this journey. Thank you so much. It's been launched, so this is officially the end. We look forward to the finished product with all of the strategies sort of combined together to be a more resilient organisations and communities. Keep engaging with this through the Qfca website and reaching out to the Qfca staff. Thank you all for being here. This sort of concludes the event. If anyone wants to stay behind and chat, please do so. We'll hang around and have virtual champagne with you. But thank you so much for being here, and thank you again, Katie, for the launch.
My pleasure. And I hope to see and visit all of you at some stage in the next 12 months in person.
Right.
And in location.
Fabulous.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye
you
now.
all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.